I would say I've always been against mandatory minimums because what it does, it classifies you not based on your individual charge or your actual accountability for that wrong act, but it classes you with everybody that has committed that act and give you one general sentence. And a person oftentimes can be an addict, can have mental health issues, or just be a minor participant in that offense and receive a 30-year sentence, just like the person who was the kingpin who had been in it for 10 years. But do I believe that and a lot of other laws disproportionately affect people of color? I would say yes, in the sense that we know that it's been proven. That's the reason I ended up getting released. I was sentenced to 35 years because at the time, crack cocaine and powder cocaine was a 100-to-1 ratio. When it was lowered to an 18-to-1 ratio in 2010, that meant that I could receive a 14-year less sentence than I had. And because of that, I filed, as you stated earlier in your introduction of me, I filed a petition to the district court. The public defender signed on, and the judge reduced my sentence and released me in 2016. Of course, the government appealed, stating that it didn't apply to me because of my horrendous past and me being labeled as a career offender, which they were correct in doing so. But the judge that actually released me had looked at the sentencing document when I came through in 1996 and said that your judge didn't hold you accountable as a career offender. He sentenced you to the drug amount. But the government got two bites at the same apple because they said at that time that is correct. But in his PSI report, it does label him as a career offender, so therefore the judge didn't have to necessarily state it on the record, and the Court of Appeals agreed. So just as well as I was stating, that the fact that there was a disparity between the two drug types based on the type of drug that I was selling in the community that I was selling. So yes, there is a disparity in the sentencing. I wouldn't say in the laws per se themselves, but in the sentencing aspect of it.
Let's talk a little bit about the organizations. You referenced Families Against Mandatory Minimums, and there are myriad of organizations that are working to advance criminal justice reform on the left and the right. Organizations like Cut 50, like Americans for Prosperity and the Foundation, like Freedom Works and others who are fighting at the federal level, but also at the state level. Talk a little bit about your role right now in the last 8 or 9 months since your release in January, working with those organizations and what you've seen at the state and federal level with the importance of these groups working together.
Okay. It's really important that the groups work together, including YAL, as far as educating people, of interest at college level of these situations that exist so that you can go out and investigate them and do the work as well. But being able to work with those organizations all on criminal justice reform, it takes everybody, because the first thing there has to be acknowledgement. So once you make it known to somebody, then you start working together to bring about changes. And these different organizations working together, coming up with ideas and solutions on how to address the situation. But what had taken place was, when I went back to serve the remaining 10 years, after I had been out for nearly 2 years, I was ordered to self-surrender. So in May 14th, I self-surrendered and went back to do the additional 9.5 to 10 years. But during that 7-month period while I was locked up, as you stated, the First Step Act passed, signed into law by President Trump. Then the public defenders filed a motion that I received on New Year's Day, which is a holiday. And then 3 days later, on January 3rd, I'm being told by the staff members at the jail, did you hear the news? And I'm like, I ain't heard no news. What news? They was like, you going home. The judge granted your immediate release. Well, after I got released, the President of the United States invited me to be his guest and his wife Melania at the State of the Union. And when that took place, then from that point on, they was able to highlight the fact that you stated I was incarcerated for 22 years without any infractions or disciplinary violations during that period. They had stated that I was a model inmate, and at the time, rehabilitation wasn't necessarily the focus of incarceration. Only incapacitation was, which means that you take a person away from society for a particular period of time, whether they change or not, you release them back into society afterwards. Well, that's not reducing the number of recidivism to go down, and that's not allowing that person to be rehabilitated and a progressive member of society once he returns. So because of that, they was able to present my situation to several senators on Capitol Hill. They was able to, because it had caught national media attention, to hear about the story to hear people's outrage on how can this be cost efficient, how can this be beneficial morally, socially, or humanely. And because of that, I've been able to go around as a criminal justice reform fellow with the organization FAM and speak to legislators and governors in different states about sharing my story and on some ideas to reduce mass incarceration and extensive sentences.
And what we saw, particularly in May of last year, as you faced reincarceration, as you knew that you were returning into the prison system, as we saw folks, and the part of this I really want the folks in the audience and who are watching perhaps online to know is that everyone can play a role in this fight. So you may not have a platform like a Senator Rand Paul or a Senator Cory Booker, both of whom were and still are strong advocates of criminal justice reform, but the folks in the audience and those watching online and beyond know that engaging in social media was something that was really important. And Mr. Charles, as you re-entered the prison system, I discovered an article from a WPLN reporter, Giulietta Martinelli in Nashville, who really told your story. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the things that you guys have heard here in the trainings over the weekend and as you go out into your communities, you understand the importance of storytelling. And what I found was, as more and more outlets heard about your story, from Reason Magazine to Fox News to dozens of local affiliates across the country, the American people were outraged that you faced reincarceration. So what did you know about that process as you returned to the prison system in May of last year? What did you hear from the outside about what was going on, particularly around your case and perhaps even what was going on with Alice Marie Johnson?
When I first went back, like I said, it was a disheartening time because I was ordered by the judge to self-surrender in May. And when I went back, I still had faith in God, but I didn't have a lot of faith in the system because they weren't able to take into accountability all the rehabilitation and the things that I had accomplished throughout my period of incarceration and when I was released. But as you stated, Julie Martinelli did a WNPR report, and in it she highlighted that I hadn't had any disciplinary infractions in those 22 years. She also highlighted what I'd accomplished during that nearly 2-year period that I was out. I had a church home, I had a job, I had purchased a truck, and I was volunteering my time and services into the community. So once that became known, she actually did the story on it, and it caught national media attention because everybody was stating, how can this man who have already served over 20 years on a nonviolent offense be ordered to return to prison? So when I went back, I really didn't hear much about what was going on the outside because I was back in the county jail where information coming in is limited only to whoever you can get on the other side of the line to have a phone conversation with them. And I had a friend named Naomi Tharp, who's one of my greatest friends and strongest advocates, that actually continued to take my story and present it on a higher platform. And she was saying, man, you're not gonna believe what's going on out here. She was like, everybody is outraged about what's going on. I was like, yeah. And then I got a call from a professor in Georgetown named Sean Hotwood, who stated he wanted to take my case pro bono and present it to the president himself and Jared Kushner, and he did so because he was also working with the White House on the First Step Act. And so I was like, okay, and he was like, just hang tight, hang strong, and I was like, well, really, that's all I can do. But anyway, as I continued to just look forward to clemency or pardon, because that's what we were hoping for at the time, because the First Step Act actually had a bunch of provisions in it to thwart recidivism and to allow judges to have authority back in their courtroom. But it wasn't going to reach back and get me compared to what it was that I was being returned to prison for. But as Senator Chuck Grassley said when I went to see him, he was like, I'm the reason you out. He was like, I made sure that amendment was in there that made retroactive those 2000, he's a funny guy, made retroactive those 2010 sentencing guideline changes. But once I ended up hearing that, it was funny because before I even found out that that provision was in it, Senator Rand Paul actually I was in Kentucky, Litchfield, and I actually seen him on TV in Lexington, Kentucky, and he was like laying out the different things that the First Step Act would do. And in it, he said, made retroactive the crack cocaine change, and I was like, that's what I'm waiting on. And it's funny because I actually got to meet him in Kentucky, and he said he came to an event at Life Learning Center just to see me. I'm like, no, I'm here to see you. But it was funny because that was the first time that I even knew in November, late November, that provision was even in there. And because of that, like I said, my story just continued to take wings, and it was like, we need to focus back on rehabilitation because we want people coming out that has been changed, that are ready to be employed, that are ready to make a difference. So just the fact that everybody collectively came together, as you stated, the bill itself was bipartisan, but I always give much credit to the President of the United States because he holds the highest office and he needs to be respected. But at the same token, when the bill kind of didn't go over the threshold, because there was a new Congress, a new Senate coming in, and that they was talking about, well, we're not going to do it before January. We're going to wait till after the new Congress and Senate come in. The president was like, no, Mitch McConnell, well, let me call Senator McConnell, I want you to go ahead and take the vote on it. And because of that, Mitch McConnell got on news himself. I heard him myself state at the president's insistence, I'm going to go ahead and take a vote on it. And because of that, the bill went on and was passed and successfully signed. So I got a mind like an elephant when it comes to that. I ain't going to never forget that part.
Interesting question that I heard yesterday that I want to relay to you, and I just want to take a poll of the audience. How many of you, by show of hands, raise your hand if you can ever recall a time when you didn't have steady access to the internet or the Google machine? When you didn't have. So very, very few of you don't remember a time when you didn't have at least some regular access to the internet. Ms. Charles, I want to ask you, as you returned to society in 2016, what were some of the struggles that you faced and some of the things that you learned when you sort of acclimated yourself to the new technologies that had been advanced and developed since your initial incarceration?
Okay. When I was released in 2016, I was given my prison ID card as a form of ID, and I was given money for lunch and dinner to make it to my destination. That's all I had. So as I got and a Greyhound bus ticket. So as I get on the Greyhound bus ticket, everybody is on there and they like this, and that's how we played video games back in the day. But they're on their phones doing it, you know what I mean? So that was new to me, and I didn't really register and understand it, and I'm like, wow. And then I was like, I need to make a call, and they was like, those things don't even, because I'm thinking of pay phones, like the prisons got. They like, those things don't even exist on places, so I'm like wondering how I'm gonna even get a cab once I get off the bus to get to the halfway house. But the fact that I had to relearn all of that additional technology, the cell phones were like big brick phones when I got incarcerated. So therefore, now seeing that there was these small cell phones, and then when I got one myself, I was like just amazed by all the different things that, not playing games, just using it, the different ways to use it. So I was just amazed and learning all of that. And I had a phone, and I'm so used to and they're like, you don't have to hit it that hard. You don't have to touch it that hard. They was like, you're gonna break the face. You know what I mean? So I had to learn all of that all over again.
So, and to add to that, for those of you who have attended a YALCON and you've seen Mr. Charles speak, you know that he is on Facebook and loves taking photos and really loves these kinds of events. Talk about a little bit about that sense of community that you found in social media and how you've been able to tell your story far and wide, even beyond the stage of an event like this. How more and more people have heard not only about your story, but about what we're working on in the criminal justice space, and how social media has actually made it easier for you to do that.
Social media has made it so easy that just putting the information in and hitting the click of the button, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands and millions of people throughout the United States and across the world can be informed about it. So therefore, that in itself is a great use or tool for everybody, including the people here, whenever they want to go out and start representing their legislators and see what issues that they're actually believing in, and if they want to promote those issues and stand with the many. But social media just on a whole different platform is something that I never even expected. And because of that, like you stated, my situation, Chad Marks' situation, what happened to Alice Marie Johnson, and a lot of the other injustices that are currently being righted, I have now been put beyond what the newspaper itself can do. Normally you put it in the newspaper, and because that article runs in the newspaper, people are able to see it and catch on to it in other news media. Well, now you can just go to it and click enter, you know what I mean, or send, and it goes and travels way farther than the newspaper ever could. So like I said, just technology itself just blew me away.
One of the cool things about this experience and about telling your story across the country is the fact that more and more people are realizing what's going on and what's happening, and we're humanizing this. We're taking somebody who's incarcerated, telling their personal story, and sharing that far and wide. Talk a little bit about what the folks in this audience can do, and what folks who may listen or hear this later on, what they can do in their own communities to make an impact, like what you're doing here across the country.
The fact that oftentimes you hear a person's situation or their story, but you don't get to see their face. That's what you mean by humanizing it. Oftentimes, when you go into prison, you lose your dignity. In other words, you have a sentence that you have to serve, and until you return to society, you're a nobody. But it's sad that oftentimes, because of some of the barriers to reentry, that even once you paid your debt to society and have returned to society, you still seem to have those barriers that says you're a nobody and you are denied housing and employment. So therefore, I would just say that the thing that we can all come together and do is continue to speak about the issues, share them with others, get involved. Like I say, everybody knows somebody, word of mouth or whatever. So just the fact that you're able to hear somebody, see that person's face, realize that they're not an anomaly. This just didn't happen to them. There are several hundreds of other thousands of people that it's happening to that don't have the voice, that we are able to be their voice and see that they also receive justice.
We've got another question from our friends in the audience, Emmanuel, and you can tweet these questions at GLA Training using the hashtag #MakeLibertyWin. Emmanuel asks, did you lean toward a libertarian or liberty-minded philosophy before your prison sentence? So the question is, were you political before your prison sentence? And if not, or if so, how was your experience in the incarceration system? How did that change or modify your political philosophy?
Well, I would say I've never been political. I've never voted in my life. I'm 53 years old, and I've never voted in my life. Like I said, I grew up in an impoverished neighborhood. I went through some hardships as a child that it caused me to just try to sign up for the military and get out of that situation. Once I went into the military, seeing that there was a different type of authority that I still wasn't willing to submit to, I ended up getting out and just living a riotous lifestyle. And because of that, I never voted one way or the other. And when I got locked up, like I said, I was locked up for 4 different presidents. So, I've seen both Democrats and Republicans. And a lot of people ask me, what do you think about this administration? Well, this administration got it done. I'm a testament to that. So I think a lot about the administration. So as far as being a liberty-minded person, I believe that less government involvement is always the answer. I believe that not, especially coming from a prison to where I see people in there with so many different offenses. So I believe some things need to be decriminalized. I don't believe that every type of behavior needs to be criminalized. Some need treatment, some need some other type of diversion. So I would say that the liberty movement, the fact that we believe in less government, that we believe that we stand upon the issues that are vital of importance to us, as Cliff stated back in, I think we was in San Jose, as he stated, when they represented somebody, that person goes, if they flip-flop on the issue, they hold them accountable. So I wouldn't say necessarily that I'm about a political mindset, I'm about an accountability mindset. These are the issues, this is the lane that I'm in on criminal justice reform. I know it from inception, I know it from the period that I was incarcerated, and from release, the barriers that exist and the things that could be done to eliminate some of them.
Now, and just to make this point again, you said that you had not voted and you've never voted. Now, to throw you just a little bit of a curveball, are you considering running for office?
Oh man, no, don't vote for me. No, I would just say that I have an interest in criminal justice reform because I received a 35-year sentence for a nonviolent drug offense. I've met people that have life sentences. I've met people like Chad Marks, who has been in a significant amount of time for a nonviolent drug offense, who has changed, but because when he was incarcerated, the First Step Act wasn't passed. That means that rehabilitation was not able to be taken into accountability as a form of being released. Now it is with the passage of the First Step Act. So therefore, he has paid his debt to society. He has changed. He has served far more than what was appropriate for the crime that he committed. I believe he have anyway. So therefore, I'm about helping those people and people with life sentences and people with 60 and 80 years for the same offense that I went in, that are trapped in the bottle because there's no relief valve. Once you've been in prison for over 1 year and your 1 or 2 years and your direct appeal has been denied, and you have 1 year from that time to file a post-rehabilitative motion. After that, let's say 3 years, if you've been in prison over 3 years, you have no right to any judicial recourse, even if you have a legitimate claim that will release you from prison. And because of that, there are so many people stuck with these enormous amount of time in the prison system that is causing it to stack up and be mass incarcerated because you still have people coming in today. One thing I've always taken accountability for is my own wrong actions. Yes, I committed my crime, and I should have been punished to a significant amount of time for that crime, not for everybody committing that crime. So I do believe in holding people accountable, but I believe in holding them only accountable for their wrong actions. But from that, thank you. But from that same standpoint, I also believe that a person, after they have satisfied the sentence that was imposed on them or should be shortened, should be released and given a second chance to come out and prove, in fact, to themselves and their families first. See, I got to prove to society thirdly. I got to prove it to myself and my family first that I am a different person, that I do live a different lifestyle, and that I do want to succeed in life. And then society can witness that change that has worked within me, that my family is able to witness, that you're able to witness, and then also say, well, wait a minute, why come the other people can't receive a second chance?
And I just want to make a point because it's Saturday evening, and here in about 48 hours, Chad Marks has a motion before the court, I believe in the Eastern District of Kentucky. If you're interested in this issue, you can find him on Facebook and on Twitter, and it is, again, Families Against Mandatory Minimums at fam.org are humanizing these stories, and Chad Marks is one of them. I think we have time for one more question. It looks like Ashley from out in the audience says, she asks, how do we start effective conversations with people on the political opposite, on the left, who support, virtue signaling athletes, but don't know a lot about the real criminal justice efforts within the liberty movement or what's taken place here on the traditional right of center? And how do we bring those seemingly disparate groups together to make real change at the state and the federal level?
I would say it all starts with informing people. You got to go out and speak to these people. You got to ask them what it is that they believe, then share with them what you believe. And as I think Cliff said it last night, in other words, once you start, because it's not misinformation, it's just the fact that most people aren't informed. So therefore, if you inform them, this is the way that we believe and why I believe. So therefore, as you always normally ask sometimes, what do I think people can do to go get involved? I say, talk to your legislators, talk to your neighbors, get on social media. Say, did you know that this took place? Do you realize that somebody stated that this is happening, and I researched it, and it is happening, because your voices matter. And the fact that I believe that Young Americans for Liberty are going to be some of the next people that actually become politicians, become the organizers themselves, and have your own organizations, that your voice is important because you're able to not only present this to other people, but make them aware of it and see your perspective on it, and actually find that y'all have some commonality in it. And they may want to support you even further.
You know, we do have a couple of more minutes, and we're here in Detroit celebrating liberty and learning how to make liberty win. And not just a few miles ago, or miles away, yesterday, Kanye West performed in Detroit, downtown, and Kim Kardashian, so you can applaud for Kanye. Talk a little bit about, and this has a point, I have a point here. Talk a little bit about some of the hurdles that you faced as you re-entered society in January, and in particular, how perhaps Kim Kardashian West was able to bring awareness for not only Alice Marie's issues last year, but also yours, and how she was able to help break down some of those barriers.
Me and Kim Kardashian West have become friends. We've become friends while I was incarcerated, and more so after my release, because I didn't know it before I was incarcerated. But during the time, I'm talking about that 7 months that I went back. But during the time that I went back for those 7 months, she spoke to the president twice on my behalf, seeking a pardon or commutation of sentence for me. And she shared with me after I got released that the president had stated that he would. But Jared Kushner had stated the same thing. Sean Hotwood, the Georgetown professor, had stated the same thing, that he was going to do it. So there was no issue whether he was going to do it or not. It was just when it would be done. But Kim Kardashian West spoke to him twice on my behalf after she found out the injustice that I went through. Then after my release, I ran into the zero tolerance barrier for housing and employment. And because I couldn't find a place to stay, the Tennessean, because I'm from Nashville, ran a story in the newspaper, talking about the newspaper instead of social media. But anyway, ran a story in the Tennessean stating that I had been released. I had been to the White House several times, attended the State of the Union, and can't even find housing. And because of that, Kim Kardashian West and her, one of her representatives named Stacy read about it, and because she was already familiar with the situation that I went through caused me to be reincarcerated, she reached out to us and said, tell a landlord that if they're willing to rent you a place, that I will be your co-signer and pay your rent for 5 years. So I did that. And we went to a place that I thought that I was actually going to get in, and the renter said, yeah, but the landlord said no because he has a felony. And then once we was able to relate that back to Kim Kardashian West, she said, okay, I'm gonna take it from here. I'm gonna tweet it myself. And when she tweeted it, we got like over 2,500 offers for a place for me to stay. And she did exactly as she had stated. She paid for my rent for 5 years at the place of my choosing.
One of the cool things in that weekend, what's awesome about this movement and what's really awesome about Young Americans for Liberty and what you guys are accomplishing is that we were at a criminal justice reform conversation at Tulane University in New Orleans, one of my favorite cities in the country, when she tweeted this out. Yeah. And as we're having this very similar conversation, there are emails, hundreds and hundreds of emails that are coming in about this. Talk about, if you would, some of the other hurdles that are faced by those, because 90 to 95% of individuals who are incarcerated return to society. They go back out. There are uncles, there are brothers, there are neighbors and sisters and mothers. What are some of the hurdles that they face in addition to housing and employment that we can raise awareness for as we go back out into our communities?
We know that housing and employment stability is very important to successful reentry. But the fact that, as you stated, I hadn't voted in 53 years, but I lost my voting rights because of that offense. The fact that there's fines and restitution fees that have to be paid while you're on probation, here it is, you getting released from jail. They're not giving you a grace period for you to pay on these fines. They're telling you got to get a job. When I say they're telling you, I mean the probation office is telling you that you got to get a job and start paying on these fines and fees immediately. Some places will cause you to not even be able to get a driver's license until you are correct on your payment. Then there's other barriers to employment. Say, for instance, if you hold barbering skills or whatever, then you don't even get a license because of that felony conviction, yet you went to jail for something totally unrelated to that job, but now they're telling you can't even work in that field because you have the felony conviction. So there's a lot of barriers and stigmas still attached, even banning the box to just simple employment. The fact that on the application, especially now that you got to do them online, most of them, you click that box that say that you are a prior felon, you ain't even got to worry about a call back. As a matter of fact, he don't even have to worry about you coming in to see him because you filled out the application online. So there's a lot of things being done to ban the box, to ask employers to hire us by giving them tax incentives for hiring us, for allowing them to be able to bond us through bonding programs, including the president himself did a Second Chance Hiring Act back, I want to say in April when we was at the White House, asking employers to hire us. As a matter of fact, he stated sometimes we are some of the hardest working employees because we got a point to prove, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of barriers that to me are nonsensical, because if you want somebody who has served his sentence to be reunited with his family and continue to raise his family and be a meaningful part of society, he got to have somewhere to stay and somewhere to work. I mean, to me, anybody, period, that's a man would require to have a job are a place to stay, and you saying no because of the felony conviction, you can't stay here, but you can stay there, and staying over there is the same place that I just came out of that got me into the situation of incarceration that you're telling me now I got to return to. That's not fair.
I just want to end by saying the Grassroots Leadership Academy can bring this kind of programming to your campus, and we love to partner with Young Americans for Liberty. And I just want to this is the last YALCON of 2019, and I want to give Mr. Charles a round of applause for being here with us.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
I wanna